Hello and welcome to this episode of Intercompany Financial Management Insights, monthly discussions with intercompany leaders. My name is Jeremy Walmer, CPA, and I am the Chief Customer Success Officer at Blackline, formerly FourQ. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with mathematician turned researcher Diane Hagglund, the founder and principal of Dimensional Research. Our discussion is going to be focused on a recent survey we conducted with Diane called The Reality of Intercompany. Welcome, Diane. It's great to have you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeremy. I'm so looking forward to discussing the results of our latest research called The Reality of Intercompany. This is based on an online survey that Blackline commissioned with Dimensional Research to understand what's going on with intercompany, what's the trends, what's hard, what's happening with technology and innovation. The full details of the report, which Blackline has graciously made available for download, are available. You can read, you can see the exact questions, but we're just going to have a conversation today about those findings. Very importantly, when you're talking about research, you want to know where the numbers are coming from. And what we're going to be talking today is about an online survey of just over 100 intercompany stakeholders. Every person in this study worked at a multinational company that had a finance or accounting responsibility and was responsible for their company's intercompany. That rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? So for those of you who are remembering your Stats 101 class right now and are thinking, how many participants is that? This is a relatively small number for a survey, but for a topic like this, you really do want to have highly qualified individuals as opposed to a lot of individuals. And so that's what we're looking at here, a great survey based on a small, high quality sample of people who were really engaged, as we saw when we got into the findings. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
And I have to say, I was very excited about this survey. Even though you say it's a small sample size, it gave us some really good insight into the minds and how people are acting within intercompany. There's a lot of complexity across the organizations. We know that there's a lack of policy compliance or process across all organizations, just because of how local these issues can really be. What did the survey uncover?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the most obvious findings out of the survey is just that intercompany it's hard. You know, when you started drilling down into the challenges and kind of the day-to-day things that the professionals responsible for, doing these processes and delivering these results deal with, it's difficult. Just at a top level, we found, if you ask people, hey, what's challenging about intercompany, they tell you. Almost everyone came up with something, with the top of the list being, as you mentioned, compliance. We had, well over half of our intercompany stakeholders are really struggling with compliance across the various jurisdictions that they deal with. You also things like a lack of company-wide views into all of the activities associated with intercompany, and the lack of ownership for, there's so many people, so many organizations involved that many companies are dealing with just leadership of how to approach this. Then once you get past your kind of top three issues, you get into two things that really struck me as being, kind of subtle but insanely important. The first is the legal entities who complain about the accuracy of allocations. So that's got to mean some really challenging phone calls for the people doing intercompany, trying to talk to people about how do we figure this out, right? And the other one was just how all of those little variances, as a mathematician, lots of little things really add up to big things. And that was something we heard a lot from the participants, is that they add up. So these challenges and many more are making this just a really hard job for the individuals who have to figure this out. I don't know, Jeremy, you mentioned that, it helped you understand. I'm sure that wasn't a surprise for you that this is a difficult thing to do.
No, it is. It's not surprising. This is difficult. And it's also not surprising that almost every single participant said that they have an issue. I mean,
96%.
Yeah. I was actually more surprised about the 4% that said they didn't than anything else, because I think at some level within the organization that there always is some sort of issue along the intercompany chain. So I thought it was enlightening, but also understanding of where this data came from makes complete sense to me. Second, down on the compliance route, let's talk about e-invoicing. And that's a hot topic for many companies right now. How did the survey participants respond to this topic? What did you find out?
Yeah, definitely. And this was one that you could see people like read our question about e-invoicing and were, had very strong feelings about it. What we mostly, and we asked a pretty high level question. We wanted to know, is e-invoice going to complicate intercompany operations, or maybe it's going to make it like less complicated? A lot of times these processes in place, as soon as there's legislation, it forces people to act a certain way and it can make things better. This is not the case, though, with e-invoicing. Our intercompany stakeholders are really concerned about this, with 3/4, 75%, saying that they think that it's going to make their lives more complicated, not less. Now, one thing, Jeremy, I'm really curious to ask you about, because I knew I was looking at this data and I could ask Jeremy what he thought. I'm wondering if this is likely to be, sometimes there's short-term pain for a long-term gain once you actually put the work in. And I'm wondering if there might be a silver lining, and down the road, maybe if we went back and asked this question, people would be more positive about e-invoicing? Or do you think this is just another one of those really difficult things that the intercompany stakeholders are being asked to deal with?
Well, kind of taking this in different pieces, is I don't think this is a short-term type of thing that's happening globally. So this is going to be long-term, and we're seeing it more and more, and countries have been talking about this coming down the pipeline for the next decade. We're going to see companies or countries requiring e-invoicing. The silver lining is that it's going to force organizations to categorize and make their data more available, more electronic, and in a way that they didn't have it before, just because it's going to be forced for them to do it. So there's the silver lining is you have to find a solution now, you have to organize it, and you're going to have more visibility and transparency into your intercompany data than you ever had before. So if you do this right and you think about it now, you can actually prepare yourself for the future and actually be better off. But it is going to be a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, Jeremy, and I did hear you say that caveat, if you think about it, right? It's I'm sure it could easily go the other direction if you're not thoughtful.
Oh, it can definitely go the other direction. It can be very painstaking because every country is a little bit different in what they're requiring. So if it's thought about strategically and the correct vision is in place, it can be not as difficult as it can really seem. And I know one of the metrics you sought to uncover is what is the intercompany volume as a multiple of revenue. So what did you find out? What did this tell you?
Yeah, and I want to start by saying on this topic, so when I was approached by Blackline about doing this study, I really wasn't familiar with intercompany. We did a lot of research on, finance, accounting in general. As a small business owner, we're actually, a global company ourselves. So we're small, but we have to deal with issues like transfer payments and things like that. So I sort of had a general idea of how some of this worked. I've managed, large budgets in my career and had to allocate costs and things. But as we dove into this, one of the things that was just so interesting to me is how a single cost can pop up so many times in a single set of books. It passes through multiple legal entities. Centralization sometimes is increasing that, with the various things. And it was one of the things that I learned personally in this project was just how often these transactions happen, much more than revenue. And in fact, when we looked at this and asked, so at your company, what volume of your intercompany volume is a multiple of revenue, every single one of our participants, their intercompany volume was more than their revenue, right? And for most, it was like a lot more. 58% actually said it was 5 times their annual revenue. We had 18% saying it was 10 times their annual revenue. And so these numbers are just huge. And I mean, it was educational for me to understand this, but I'm wondering, Jeremy, how, as an expert, what do you think about that? Is that a good thing because the more you're moving money around, the more you're reflecting your actual business? Or is it bad because you're just introducing this complexity? Is there a best practice here?
I would say the more you move it around, the more there is a chance for errors that can happen. So you don't really want it to be an intercompany moving over and over and over again. And I can give you a good example why. We were actually working with a customer. And if you ever work with an Excel, if you work with a Microsoft Excel, and you have a circular reference in a formula, that means the formula is referenced in its own cell. So we actually found what we call a circular reference within intercompany. One entity billed it so many times that that same charge ended up coming back to itself. So at the end of the day, it's just a overall circle of intercompany just going back and back and back. And that's what we try to avoid. And that's what you don't want. So there is a lot you'll see intercompany being more than a multiple of revenue. But the more you see that creeping up, the more likely you have more errors, more issues, and potentially what we call a circular reference. And you're just billing the same charge across the globe coming back to yourself. So it's not unusual. Getting back to your question, Diane, that revenue or your intercompany can be more than your revenue. It's just if you see it creeping up faster than your revenue, then most likely you have some sort of processing issue within your intercompany. All right. When we're looking at the top 2 or 3 issues, especially within the customers who we talk to, a lot of it is just there's no real technology solution that's out there currently that can really help with this. So they're just being very reactive to situations and the process itself. How do you deal with all these local disparate processes and really bring it up under one global umbrella?
Yeah, that's a big question. But one thing I think that the data shows in the research, how important this is. So maybe I'll take a step back and talk about when we asked about the kind of factors that are making intercompany more complex and challenging. There was a lot of things. There's just like, regulatory hurdles are increasing and volumes are growing and variances are growing and tax audit requirements and scrutiny are growing. There's a lot of things going on. But the number one thing on that list is a lack of integrated systems. And what that means in terms of having your supporting information to be able to do your work, So more than all of these, laws, and it's, so complex, the technology is the number one thing that they're saying is adding to how difficult that is. And I find this particularly interesting because we do a lot of work with technology at Dimensional. And one thing when you think about the finances accounting team is that's often where traditionally technology has entered the business. And the finance team has often been on the cutting edge of making things work. And the classic ERP system, was one of the first enterprise technologies that many companies ever invested in, brought in by the finance team because they needed to work with this. So there's a real, I think, connection to technology and the value of technology. And yet you find that even these systems which are in place are just not a solution for intercompany. And in fact, when you ask stakeholders about, hey, does ERP solve your intercompany problems, the answer is no. It's a partial solution, right? And that's, I think, the thing that comes out loud and clear when you look at the data is that there's a good partial solution for intercompany and there's pieces of it that are there, but there's just these gaps in trying to make it all work together.
It makes complete sense to me. We're seeing the exact same thing, Diane. From what your research saying and what we're seeing, the ERPs are great at what they do, but there's nothing specific that really related to intercompany. So that's why your responses align with exactly what we hear and feel from the customers.
Yeah, one of the data points that was interesting to me in the research was just the number of ERPs people have. So if you have them and they're not integrated, that's problematic, right? So you have to pull it together. So that word integration, I think, was really important.
Yep, not surprised at all. That's a lot of it is the disparate landscape of ERPs, which I guess leads into the next question that I have for you is, what did the research uncover about the multinational technology stack and the appetite for innovation?
Yeah, so certainly this, without question, is an area where stakeholders want more innovation. You ask them, like, what are the kinds of technology capabilities that are going to benefit you? And the list is pretty long. I mean, certainly various types of automation top the list, especially automation of any kind of analytics or reporting, particularly if it's smart or intelligent analytics and reporting. That's a big request. They want to see, I mean, sticking with automation, there's a desire for automation of cost and tax allocation, just taking those manual processes as much as possible and automating those. But also things like centralized dispute management. We talked, I think, at the very beginning about the times when all your legal entities don't agree about what's going on. And that's something that actually popped out in the research that really interested me, was sometimes these allocation fights go up to like C-levels within very large organizations, and having some technology to maybe help track and document and simplify some of that kind of dispute management, which can get, kind of personal sometimes. I think maybe it's hard for someone who's a little junior in the organization to, really help the executives make a final decision and move on. So there's just a real appetite for just better technology.
I agree. That's exactly where we're seeing it everywhere. So everyone wants technology to help them with their solutions. And it's always just finding the right technology to help for the right process solution and whatever is really available at the time. We're seeing more and more appetite for this as well.
So Jeremy, let me ask you a question then. You mentioned, the right technology. This is so complicated. And I know at Blackline you have a, number of different solutions. How do you figure out where to get started from where you are? What are the typical first steps that you talk about with your customers?
Well, there's really three areas that we want to look in, and then we kind of dive into it. So it's process, it's technology, and it's people and expertise. So we always kind of look at those three and make sure each one of those are in place, because your process dictates what technology you're going to need. And then you need the right people to kind of manage the process and the technology. So then when you're going through the intercompany process, just never boil the ocean. Just really always kind of go back and look at the main drivers that is going your global costs going around the world, your IT costs, your shared services, your headquarter costs, and really focus on make sure you have the correct processes, technology, and people in place. I mean, a lot of companies do not think that there are solutions out there, but there are solutions. You look at our company at Blackline alone, we have a couple solutions that can actually help depending on the need of what a company has with intercompany errors and problems within their process. So we can go from beginning to end to automate processes, and then even go through reconciliations, netting, and settlement. So it's really the end-to-end spectrum, going through each process and rolling it out globally. So then companies can have a full view and transparency into the intercompany world, which again, this is where ERPs really struggles, when you have the disparate systems to actually see everything that's going on, and you can help all the different personas that are involved in intercompany.
And so, Jeremy, when you're talking to someone, if they have all their ERPs, do they have to get that all connected first before they can call Blackline, or is that something that you help with?
Oh, we can also help with that. So as we're going along, we help actually build and design the solution where our products fit into their problems, into their process. And part of that can be going through and landscaping and saying, this is how we can help connect and build that solution. And it doesn't have to be all together, all in one. It can be built either through separate systems, connecting some, or we can do it over time. And that's what actually happens a lot of times. You hit the majority thresholds and you try to build that out to really encompass the majority of your transactions.
So of those three things you mentioned, Jeremy, people, process, and technology, which do you think is the easiest to solve?
The easiest to solve is actually probably the technology. Because process can be difficult when you're talking about different companies globally, different systems to integrate, different personas that you have to deal with, and then find the people that actually know what they're doing, that are experts in intercompany. Intercompany isn't a field; it's just a portion of the entire finance and accounting world that crosses into tax and treasury. So the technology is really the easiest part. And making sure you have the right process, governance, and the people to manage the technology, that's the harder part. So in the finance and accounting world, or even just in this global environment, Diane, we've seen a lot of attrition lately. people are just leaving their jobs. Is there anything you found in the survey results that could have lead intercompany or be a factor into people leaving their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, that's so insightful when you think about what's happening right now in the world and this crazy time that we're living in and the people. And it was, one of the things that I was really interested in is, everyone has challenges and problems with what they do. Everything is a bit hard. And part of what we wanted to understand is, like, what are the actual impacts of some of these challenges that we're talking about? Like, does it impact business results? By the way, the answer is yes. But one of the things we also looked at is we asked about how it impacts the individuals on the accounting and finance teams. What's going on with those team members? And what we found, which, frankly, really kind of got me when I was looking at the data, is the number one impact is 60% say that their team members are having physical or mental health issues because of some of the challenges that go around with intercompany. And, so just the actual people themselves are really struggling, physically and mentally from this stress. We saw also that, all-nighters are a really common occurrence as a result of intercompany. During the year-end close or the quarterly close, we're actually seeing that 90% are saying that it's regular for their staff members to pull all-nighters. And we all know, I'm going to say I'm a mother of teenagers who read a lot of science about the importance of sleep for the brain. And it's so important. And the team members are really being hit by this. And you see that, part of that causes the employee churn, which is not good for business because then you're losing that institutional knowledge. We also people talking about, staff being demotivated, some of those issues around stakeholders not being uncooperative is very demotivating for staff. So that contributes it. So there's a lot of factors in here that really very much are about the people who have to do this work that, it needs to be better, right? And if there's solutions to make it better, it's going to really have a human impact.
I can relate to a lot of that. I started my career doing intercompany, and I did a lot of all-nighters every single quarter.
Crazy. Just crazy. Yeah.
It really is. You think those days are over when you're done with college, but they go right into your work career.
Indeed.
All right, Diane, this was just very insightful. And thank you for all the work and effort that you put into this survey. I just really, again, want to thank you for your time and effort and everything that you uncovered.
Well, Jeremy, it's such a pleasure to talk to you always. It's so interesting. I look at the data and then hear your anecdotes that bring them to life. So I enjoy these conversations so much. I would encourage for the people who have been listening, as a researcher, I keep feeling like I could show you a graph. And if you are interested in this topic, I would really encourage anyone to go and download the full report. It's called The Reality of Intercompany. It's available from Blackline. And I think you'd really enjoy seeing some of the detail behind where this data came from.
All right. Again, thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take good care. Bye-bye, everyone.